And that's why an organization like Rainy Lake Medical Center can make these kind of leaps and bounds in these elements of trust in their workplace culture, executives to employees, employees to executives, employees to each other, is that they're declaring, we're going to do this, and then they're acting on that, and then they're seeing the results of that. And you can imagine the momentum that's created when you close that say-do gap.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome back to Culture Change RX. This is Sue, your host, and today I'll be doing another one of those short solo episodes that we call Culture Bytes. So back in episode number 9, I did a solo episode on the topic of trust. And in particular, I was focusing on board and executive relationship trust and gave some tactics for elevating that. And today I wanted to talk about trust between executives and employees and executives. So I want to talk more about that element of trust in our workplace. As many of you know, our annual event that we hold each year, a healthcare executive forum, we pick a special topic each year that's relevant and chosen by executives. And this year we talked about maximizing momentum with trust, teamwork, and time. And so we've been doing a lot of research and evaluation of trust in the workplace, and in particular, how the Capstone framework, when it's implemented and adopted in an organization, the impacts that it has on things like trust and teamwork. I grabbed some data actually from some of our client hospitals that have implemented our framework, adopted our framework for achieving great results, and wanted to look at it through the lens of trust in particular. And so I looked at this data in the employee surveys from several of our partners, but I just want to highlight one here today from Rainy Lake Medical Center in International Falls, Minnesota, small hospital in northern Minnesota. And when I looked specifically at their Prascani data related to elements of trust in the workplace, I looked at their baseline data from right before they started to adopt the framework for achieving great results. And the score for the employee survey results for a question related to trust in senior leadership, so really confidence in senior leadership, and that was rated at 3.55 or scored at 3.55 by the employees on their baseline survey, and that is 0.24 below the national average at that time. But within 1 year of adopting the framework, it had bumped up to 4.06 or 0.28 above the national average. So from 0.24 below to 0.28 above the national average. They were able to move that in 1 year. And then 5 years later, it's still even higher. And it's still well above the national average, like 0.36 above the Prascani national average for that score of confidence and trust in senior management's leadership. And then I wanted to look at how employees feel trusted by leadership. So do employees trust leadership, but then does leadership trust employees in return? And what I found was a question on the survey that says, I can act on my own without asking for approval. So that's really, in our terms, we call that proceed until apprehended, or an element of empowerment, right? Being trusted, being empowered to take action, and that employees feel like they're trusted to do that. And their baseline survey before they adopted the framework was 4.12, which was a little bit above the national average, 0.09. but within 1 year, it had risen from 4.12 to 4.28, now 0.25 above the national average. And then again, the 5 year mark showed that they were still increasing, and they were now at 4.46, which is 0.42 above the national average. So these 5 year trends of what's happening to their trust scores really is quite impressive. So now, in these elements of looking through their employee survey and how employees perceive trust in the workplace, it took a big leap in just the first year, but then continues to move on and on over time. So a couple resources that I want to throw out here for you, on this topic is, I mentioned it in episode 9, Speed of Trust by Covey. That's just a classic. But another good one came across as I was doing some research, digging in even deeper on this topic of trust in the workplace, is a book called Trusted to Thrive by Marie Claire Ross. And its subtitle is How Leaders Create Connected and Accountable Teams. Thought it was a great resource. And in fact, she has a definition in there of trust in the workplace. The essence of trust in a workplace environment is that everyone is able to rely on and predict each other to make good on their promises. So that's a nice, healthy work application of a definition of trust. So, really as humans, we possess a core human need to trust others, to be trusted in return, and to also trust in ourselves, right? So make good on promises to ourselves. So, and when that is present, right, when there is trust present, people do align around a purpose on their team. They embrace goals and objectives. They're willing to collaborate and are really empowered to do their best work, right? But when it's absent or even made vulnerable, work can become more difficult and even slow down. So take longer to do things like improve or grow or execute on things that make things better for the future. And our framework is all about taking action to make things better for the future. We're not in the business of maintaining the status quo. It's all about leading our organizations to a bigger, brighter future and doing that faster if we can. And I think the example of Rainy Lake is, and the data I shared is that it really can move fast. We think that things like improving trust, that should be so slow, right? And their data shows that it doesn't have to be slow to improve trust. And then trust really helps you maximize momentum, right? So you can go faster when there is trust. So I love this definition, or this distinction, I guess, yeah, you'd say, related to trust, whether it's trusting others or others trusting us, is that there's really two distinctions related to trust. There's task trust. So what people do, that, the actions or the tasks that they do. So task trust. Do I trust you to do this work? Are you trusted to do this work? Do I trust myself to do this work? And so it's really, do I trust in the actions? But then there's relationship trust. Do I trust how people will relate to me and how I can relate to them, how they will behave, our relationship? So can I trust in the relationship aspects of our human interactions, not just trust in the work? And, do you have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to do the work? And I can trust you to do the work. So those are two different distinctions that we can work on. So if we're looking to elevate trust, we might want to think about, how does this elevate our task trust? And how does this elevate our relationship trust? And really both would be optimal, right? Well, one thing that's interesting too about executive trust, trusting executives in the organization, is that I was an insider for 20 plus years, most of that time serving on a senior leadership team. And so I was part of that executive team that needed to be trusted by the employees and the providers and the community, right? And the board. And so one of the things that I recognized as an insider serving on an executive team is that each time any one of us on the executive team behaved or acted in a way that either elevated or eroded trust,
it impacted the perception of the entire executive team, right? So we were thought of as one single unit or body. We were the executive team. And so if one of us, our behavior or actions were not elevating trust or in keeping with high trust, it impacted the perception of the entire executive team and maybe even the entire organization, right? And so it's really important that when we are serving on executive teams, we understand and own our own behavior, and in particular recognize its impact on the perception of the entire executive team, not just us as individuals. And, really, too, as executives, we are on stage, right? And so every single move we make seems to be magnified, like we're in a spotlight. So, again, as each one of us is going about our work as executives, we're on stage, we're being magnified, we're in the spotlight. And so we know that, there's a phrase we also use, a quote we use: negativity screams at us and positivity only whispers. And so the book Positivity, and the author there, she says negativity screams at us and positivity only whispers. So, all those good things we may do as executives, interestingly, they may only be whispers, right? But if we make one misstep, it's often magnified, and it screams out into the organization. And again, it doesn't just affect us as individuals, it affects the entire organization. So we have to be mindful of how we represent our organization, our entire executive team, when we serve on an executive team of a healthcare organization. So, one pointer I wanted to make out or bring forward from our event about elevating trust in their workplace, either personal trust or organizational trust, is that, really, to maximize trust in an organization, it really requires us to define standards, strategies, goals, practices, and plans, like to really define things like a strategic plan, a communication plan, a rounding practice, our behavior standards, our feedback practices, our defined goals, our, action plans, and these kind of things. Like, when we define these things in writing and we put thoughtful, proactive effort into these kind of plans and goals and practices and standards and strategies, right? When we do that and then we deliver on that, we build trust. So the plan becomes the promise. And the promise, every time we honor it, it builds trust. So when we set goals and we work to achieve them, and we do achieve them or make major progress towards them, then we're building trust. If we have a communication plan and it says that daily, weekly, monthly, this is how we're going to communicate, and we act on that, we're building trust. If we have behavior standards and every time we behave in accordance with those standards, we are building trust. When we have a rounding practice that senior leaders or leaders round monthly and in this way, and every time we do that, we're building trust, right? And so these are the kind of things, and really it's not just about having these plans and saying we're going to do it. Of course, we have to close that say do gap. So we say we're going to do it and then we do it. And every time we do that, and that's why an organization like Rainy Lake Medical Center can make these kind of leaps and bounds in these elements of trust in their workplace culture, executives to employees, employees to executives, employees to each other, is that they're declaring we're going to do this, and then they're acting on that, and then they're seeing the results of that. And you can imagine the momentum that's created when you close that say do gap, and in particular have this regular cadence and rhythm of executing on these plans and updating these plans. And so this work we do with our partner organizations really is creating these systems or cycles for these plans to happen. And so there's this, planning, execution, evaluation, planning, execution, evaluation, plan, do, study, adjust, and as you get these systems cycling in these plans and these standards and these goals, and you get this cycling in the organization, it's just, it goes faster, faster, faster. And all along the way, you're building trust and momentum, and the organization can just keep getting better. So it's not like a project that starts and ends. It's like these new wheels in motion that keep your organization moving higher and better and faster and bigger and all of those things. So trust is kind of some of the oil that's needed to keep this engine going and going fast and farther and long term. So yeah, trust. Go back and listen to episode 9 if you didn't. If you want to hear about some tactics in particular related to elevating trust between executives or boards. But when we want executives to have trust with employees, employees to have trust with executives, it's really about having these promises or these plans in writing and then executing well on them and celebrating the results of that, the progress of that, and then just keep cycling through that. So maximize momentum by maximizing trust, and both relationship trust and task trust, and make those plans, honor those plans, and build trust.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.